This is Mark Guerrero. Welcome to East L.A. Music Stories, episode number 11. My guest is East L.A. manager and producer of the 70s, Art Brambila. How you doing, Art?
Doing well, Mark. It's good to see you. How are you?
Very good. We have a nice tale to tell here. And what's great about this is since you were a businessman, aside from being a songwriter, we're going to hear some of the inside scoop of what went on behind the scenes, which is great. But let's get started with your childhood and how you got into music and what where you grew up.
Well, I don't know if my childhood was typical of an East L.A. kid, but it was tumultuous. And I grew up on Clover Street, which was a notorious area in the area where the San Antonio winery is now. There used to be a small village there of 5 streets that ran perpendicular to North Main. And at the end of these 5 streets, there were the railroad tracks. We were surrounded by railroad tracks and small industry that had been there since the late 1800s, and eclectic houses of different styles that were literally brought in from other neighborhoods to form a company town for the Southern Pacific Railroad. So virtually everybody that lived there, and there were a lot of people, it was very dense. It must have been like perhaps 1,000 dwellings and possibly 7,000 people living there, large families, mostly Mexican American, almost all Mexican American. It was a hard-working, hard-living life there. And in the early 40s, it was one of the flashpoints of the Zoot Suit riots, where most of those families had a lot of kids. So there was probably 50% of the people that lived there were under 25. In my day, in the 50s, by then it was a notorious gang area, and I was very much a part of it. I went to Albion School, which was right down the street. I hung out at the Downey Playground. It had nothing to do with the city of Downey, but it was called the Downey Playground because North Broadway, which was on North Broadway, and that was once called Downey Road. And beyond that, there was the hills of Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop, where they built Dodger Stadium. So growing up in the 50s and going to the schools I went to, Nightingale, I was kicked out of it. I was kicked out of it always for gang activities, never for drugs, which is something I never fooled with, never for stealing anything or hurting anybody, because they're just kids who grew up during the Second World War with the mentality and the indoctrination of fighting. We experienced the Zoot Suit riots at a very early age, grew up during the Second World War and the Korean War. And I guess we had it in us to go out and start trouble. So I was kicked out of Nightingale and sent to a faraway school at that time on First and Vermont called Virgil. And when I went to Virgil, I saw how other people lived, because I was one of the very few Chicanos there. So I made friends with a lot of the white people there, learned how they lived. They kind of learned about me. And I think that was one of the turning points of my life. Later, when I went to Lincoln, same thing. Within a year, I was thrown out. They sent me to Belmont and then to Roosevelt. Finally, I came back to Lincoln and graduated from there in the summer of 1959. I guess that's kind of a brief wrap up of where I grew up and the conditions I grew up, the people I grew up with. If any one of your viewers goes to that area, the only way they can recognize it is by the San Antonio winery on Lamar Street, which was right the following street from Clover. There's nothing else there except old buildings and old small industry. But that was where I grew up.
So talk about your nephews and how that worked out?
Well, as you know, Mark, and some of your viewers may know, the Salas brothers are my nephews. The Salas brothers, Rudy, the oldest of the four, was born on Moulton Street, which is right under the shadow of what was the East Side Brewery, and then it became the Pabst Blue Ribbon. He was born there, and I remember he was born I'm like 9 years older than Rudy Salas Jr. My sister Margaret married a guy from South Central named Rudy Salas, and they moved into Moulton, where Rudy was born, and then they moved to Clover Street, directly across the street from my mother's house. I remember I had 7 brothers and 4 sisters, all of whom lived in that one house for a short time, and then they started getting married. My sister got married, and my sister Margaret married a guy named Rudy Salas and moved directly across the street from us. Then Stevie was born there, Stevie Salas. And the 2 twin brothers, Richard and Robert, were born there too on Clover Street. A few doors down from us was a kid named Eddie Serrano, who you may remember from Cannibal and the Headhunters and later Yaqui. And this, that was my other nephew, Bobby Brambila, who lived next to Eddie Serrano.
But Eddie Serrano was in the Enchantments too. He was your lead singer.
That's right, he was. You're right, he was. And it was Bobby Brambila, my other nephew from my brother, Rawls' family, who formed the Enchantments. Yes. But as I said in the Grammy Museum panel discussion that you invited us into with Willie G and Jerry Gonzalez, in those areas and at that time, there were 3 things that were important to young people growing up in those barrios. And that was a family first. Family first. Remember that, because I may get back into that. The secondly was your friends in the street. The family provided. The friends in the street protected. And the third thing that was important to us was the only thing that everybody else got for free, equally. And that was music. Now, Clover Street, Lamar Street, Moulton, Antonio, and Gibbon Street at the edge of the LA River had a whole bunch of people that had come in from Mexico in the 1920s. Many of them were veterans from the Mexican Revolution and brought with them a lot of the old corridos that they sang around the campfires. So there was a lot of people that played guitars and sang those songs. We were all influenced by those Mexican songs that my father brought in, our friends' fathers and mothers. And there was music all the time in that little barrio. So it wasn't unusual for someone like me to, as crudely as I play guitar, I play like 3 chords, like maybe 4 keys and 3 chords in each of them, and sang a lot of Mexican songs. And then for me personally, country music was very much a part of my influence since I was a little boy. When Stevie and Rudy were growing up, they used to love to hear me sing, and they used to love to hear me play guitar. They'd come across the street from their house to mine, and Rudy especially wanted to learn to play guitar. So when he was just a kid, 10, 11 years old, I taught him, because he was always looking at me and looking at the guitar and can I play it? And so I taught him the first few chords. I'm very proud of that, because he often said in various interviews when he became a local celebrity that it was I who taught him the first chords. I mean, it didn't take long for him to pass me up. I don't know where he learned to play guitar, but he certainly passed me up in just a few months. He had the talent. So point I'm making is the neighborhood was full of scary things, interesting things, but always music. Virtually every house you went to, you'd hear a guitar and people singing. It was that kind of a place.
Rudy Salas Sr. was a visual artist, a pretty good one too, huh?
Rudy Salas Sr. was very creative. He was a great painter, sketch artist, muralist. His creativity rubbed off on his kids. My sister's singing, she had a wonderful. She sang professionally for a short time in Arizona. she had a great voice. I mean, there was always talent in your neighborhood, in my neighborhood, and all over, but a lot of people didn't recognize it. And we'll get into that. Yes, so my sister, Margaret, Rudy and Stevie's mother, was very, very influential in teaching them to sing the harmonies and things like that. Because when they learned to play guitar and they started singing for the family gatherings, Christmases and stuff like that, they soon were recognized by other neighborhood people who asked them to sing at their functions, and they began to grow in that way.
So how did you get into the music industry?
Well, as I said, at a very early age, I was playing guitar very crudely, and I was singing country songs and I was singing Mexican songs. And you must remember that in those days, the school system wasn't paying too much attention to Chicanos. They really, really weren't. They put us all in industrial arts, metal shop, gardening, all kinds of stupid things, I guess, expecting that we would grow up to serve them and become the gardeners and become their auto mechanics and their barbers. I chose printing. I loved printing. I was always very into words, and I became a typesetter. So at an early age, I was pretty ambitious. And at an early age, I opened up a print shop in Lincoln Heights, directly across the street from Lincoln Park, kitty corner from Lincoln Park. And I made a success out of a printing company. I borrowed money and bought some printing presses. I was young, married with Roxanne, my daughter. I wasn't married to Roxanne, I was married to her mother, Susie, and we had Roxanne as a baby. So Susie, her mother, and I ran that print shop. And in a very short time, I hired like 3 or 4 people, including one of my brothers. But something happened. I met an older man who was maybe in his 50s. He was older to me because I was like 23 or 24, by the name of Se Puede, who had a printing shop near Roosevelt High School. And he was so busy, sometimes he would send me some of his printing that needed to be done quickly. And most of what he was sending to me were flyers and posters of you guys. I mean, I was seeing your name, I was seeing all of these bands from East L.A., the Little Willie G's. I was becoming familiar because I was printing that stuff with this other man who was overwhelmed with too much business. So I became curious about the battles of the bands you guys were doing at East L.A. College and all of these venues that, Gigi Hall, the Kennedy Hall, all those places. I started going to see you guys when you were kids. Most of you are like 10 years younger than me. So I was fascinated with the music and the talent that I was seeing. And I wanted to do something about it. So on March of 1968, while I still had my print shop, I was on my way home from a delivery, and it was like 6 o'clock in the evening. And there was no point in going to the print shop because I knew that it was closed. I stopped to have a beer over on Garfield, a place called Golden Gopher or something. And the television set, they were showing, guess what? The walkouts out of Lincoln. I saw my high school on TV, and I said, hey, that's where I graduated from. I saw these kids, film clips, news clips about what's going on at Wilson and Belmont and Roosevelt. And I'm saying, wow, I went to Belmont, I went to Roosevelt, I went to Lincoln. What's going on? And when I learned that there was the walkouts, it fascinated me and it thrilled me because I was an angry young man. I was angry because they didn't give me the education that these kids of Moctezuma's Espartas, the people like Sal Castro, and the people I later got to know well. These were kids your age, were walking out and protesting. They had had enough, and I was proud. So I said, I want to be a part of this. I said to myself, but how?
Well, what were they protesting?
They were protesting the terrible education that they were giving us kids, including me, although I had graduated 10 years ago. I graduated in summer '59, and this happened in March of 1968. So 9 years earlier, I had been in those schools. And I was always angry that they never paid attention to us. They never gave us college prep course. As a matter of fact, at Lincoln High School, there were 90% Chicano, and every one of these school committees and the presidents and the consuls and all white, all white. There was very few Chicanos involved in anything because they simply didn't encourage us to go any further. They said, I literally tell us, you guys are good with your hands, so, take wood shop.
Right.
But that always pissed me off. I was not a happy camper as a teenager. I was already pissed off. I was already an activist. I mean, I was boiling to do something. And I was looking at you guys, but how can I help these kids? Why aren't they national stars and major labels, And a month or two later, there is an ad, believe it or not, in the L.A. Times. I don't know, maybe it was the Times Mirror, one of those newspapers. And they were looking for a buyer of printing products, Capitol Records. And I thought, if I could get that job, in spite of the fact that I own a print shop, I created an agenda. I might be able to convince the people to cross that fucking river and take a look at the talent that's over there. So I went for an interview, full of confidence, because I was just that way to begin with. And because I loved advertising and marketing, I was thrilled that when I did get the job, that it was in the marketing department. Now, let me tell you a little story. I was about 9 years old when I was walking down the tracks behind my house. There were huge warehouses there. And we used to break every damn window we could find from those 2-3-story brick warehouses that had been there since the 1880s. At one time, some of those were breweries. But when we all moved in there, all these angry little kids would break every window we could. And I was walking alone one day, and I saw a broken window and the product behind it. The product behind it happened to be soap, like Tide soap and White King soap boxes. But this one was called All, A-double-L, All.
I remember that.
And I looked closely and I saw a slogan. Are you there? I saw a slogan on a box printed. It said, "It's all you need." And I thought that's interesting because that's saying two things. It's all the product that you need, and it's the only thing you need. And I was fascinated by the wording. So I was 8 or 9, and forevermore, I was fascinated with words, and advertising. And it was just something that interested me. So now I go to work for Capitol Records. I sold my print shop. And I told my wife, I'm going to take this job and we're going to sell the print shop, because I was struggling with the print shop. It wasn't a complete success. So they hired me at Capitol Records as a printing buyer in the marketing department, which included the publicity, advertising, promotion. And a lot of A&R men would come to our marketing meetings to try to convince us as to what we should do with their artists and when their records are going to be. I was working with the Beatles. I found myself working with country singers like Merle Haggard and Buck Owens and Sonny James, all these people I admired as a kid. Suddenly I find myself working in that iconic tower on Hollywood and Vine, and I'm getting along well with all of my colleagues there. The very first day I get there, they took me to the Brown Derby. Now, I'm a kid from the body. If I'm talking too much about this, we'll go on to other things. But that's how I first got started. There's a lot to say about what led me into the entertainment business and looking out and looking for people like you. So that's how it started when I went to work at Capitol Records.
And you worked your way up from the printing thing to just
merchandising. I could say I connived my way into it because in the back of my mind, I was an activist. In the back of my mind, I knew there was a powder keg of talent. I had gone to the battles of the bands. I had gone to see you. And then I was reading about my own nephews on those flyers and posters that was been. I say, what the hell's going on? So when I started going to see all of you kids, I said, someday I want to do something to bring them into the limelight where they belong. So when I went to work for Capitol Records, in the back of my mind, there was an agenda. And I said, I'm going to do something about this. But I needed to get along well with all of the white and Jewish Ivy League people who had come mainly from the East Coast, had never seen a Chicano. They thought we were like Puerto Ricans and Cubans. They thought we were all the same because they were from that part of the country. But I got along with them. We all had something in common, we found out. The very first day I got there, and they took me to lunch at the Brown Derby. We noticed that we liked each other. I'm talking about these white people, which were many were my age, some were older. Very well-educated people, all Ivy League schools. And they met a Chicano for the first time. I was the only brown face in the whole tower, Mark. You know, and then I was in a position making this a decision-making position where I controlled a lot of money and where that money would go to what printers to print the posters and all this for the Beatles and James, you name it. So with the power I had at Capitol Records and meeting the producers and the A&R man and all that, and the Ken Nelsons, who was the president of the country division, and he would call me at my office, say, Art, Merle Haggard's recording, you want to come down and say, I tell my boss I'll be back in Ohio. I go downstairs to the studio and I'd see how the producers work, learned how they dealt with their artists. And you know, I was influenced by Ken Nelson. Ken Nelson was a veteran guy who was full of accolades for years and years, producing Buck Owens, Merle Haggard, and he took a liking to me. And I really respected this man. I was there when Merle Haggard recorded Okie from Muskogee. And I remember telling Ken Nelson, why is he recording? I was just a kid. And how much I'm telling Ken Nelson, why is he recording that song? You know, that's not his audience. He says, I'll tell you later, Art. So during the break, he told me, you know, look, he writes songs for what he feels. He doesn't do it for a particular audience. You watch, this is going to be one of his biggest songs he ever recorded. Sure enough, it turned out that way. So when I was working with you, I hope you remember, I wasn't involved in the creativity. I never told you how to sing a song. I never told you how to arrange it. You did everything, as I did when I was working with Tierra and Yaqui and everybody else. I worked like Ken Nelson worked. I saw a talent and I zeroed in on that talent. And I knew that it was you that was going to make it happen. My job was to put you and the others in the limelight, not to put myself in the limelight. I was a marketing man. I know how to take a product and make other people want that product. I wasn't there to tell you what notes you should, what kind of harmonies you should do and anything like that. I'm not a musician, you know, I was a businessman. I love music, I know something about music, but I'm not in your category. And I want your viewers to know that I never claimed to be. So after seeing you guys so much, I began to tell the executives at Capitol Records that they should go see this talent across the river. But they ignored me. For a long time, they ignored me. And one day, they came into our marketing meeting and, oh, we just got back from Muscle Shoals and we saw this group and they were flying all over the country, you know, spending Capitol's money to go see groups that they never even signed. And I used to get pissed off. And one day I stood up and I scolded them. Here I am, 26, 27 years old. And I'm telling, by then I had it up to here. Why don't you cross that fucking river, man? Why don't you go see what, you know, what do you talk who? You know, I said, well, it's Cannibal and Hannah. There's the Midnighters, you know, there's Little Willie G and a kid named Jimenez, you know, Little Ray Jimenez. All of these people, there's a solid. So, you know, and they didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Okay. In 1970, on August the 29th, as you know what happened when they killed Ruben Salazar, the moratorium. Now we were front page news, not only in the LA area, not only in the United States of America, worldwide front page news. You know, earlier, hey, the United States heard about the walkouts, but now the moratorium, or the sheriff's riots of the moratorium on August 29, 1970, The world knew about us.
That protest was about the fact that Chicanos and other minorities were being drafted and sent to the front lines out of proportion with the rest of the population to be.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's something that the executives and I had in common. We didn't like the fact that the young kids were getting killed in Vietnam. We supported, see that, you know, when I joined Capitol Records, the thing that we found out about each other is that we had much in common, more than we had differences. They liked me because they realized, hey, he thinks like us in regard to the politics. I mean, we didn't like the assassinations that were going on in the late 60s. We didn't like the Charles Mansons killing celebrities. We had common thoughts. And what you're right, that was another thing we had in common. We were against the war. What happened is after that, they called me on that Tuesday morning. I walked into my office. My boss says, they want to see you upstairs. And I said, oh, shit, they're going to fire me. You know, because of the barullo that we made in East L.A., the riot. And I go upstairs. Oh, sit down, you know, these executives from the NR. And I'm looking at them, okay, what, you know? Well, you know, all this stuff you've been telling us for the last couple of years about the talent across the river. And I said, yeah. Well, you know, we'd like you to scout for us. You know, go out there and find the talent. I said, well, but I'm a marketing man. They said, well, you'll still get your salary. And anyway, to make a long story short, I said to them, look, if I'm going to go out there and bring in the talent, and I'm not getting anything from it if they become stars or if they, you know, make hit records, I don't want to do that. I said, I'd rather be on my own. Well, you can do that. I said, but I need studio time. That's where the deal came in. So I said, give me 100 hours of studio time. And they said, we will do that. You can record up to 100 hours, whoever you want, whenever you want, whatever, you know, whenever is available time, under one condition, that we have the first choice of any demos that you might cut with the artist that you want to sign.
The phrase they use is they had the first right of refusal, right?
Yes, it is called that.
Yeah.
So we made that deal. You know, we shook hands on the deal. I went home that evening. I told my wife I was going to quit my job. She said, but we have to. By then we had two children, and we got the mortgage. I said, I saved up to $10,000. $10,000 was a lot of money. I said, I got $10,000 in the bank. That's going to last us a year. Give me 1 year. And she gave me her blessings. And that's how I got into the music business aside from Capitol Records. I'm probably the only producer manager that came to you guys from the inside of the industry to you, as opposed to Eddie Davis, Eddie Torres, Billy Cardenas. These guys were producers, managers that were not that familiar with the lingo, the terminology, the way that, what it is that the executives want to hear before they sign an act. I had been there for like 2 or 3 years already. I knew what they talked about when they were considering signing an artist. So I was well versed from the inside to come out to the outside to bring you guys to the inside.
The studio that they gave you was Independent Studios in Studio City. And that's where you took everybody.
Yes, that was a small studio in Studio City. Remember it?
Yes.
So the first thing I did when I left Capitol Records, obviously I didn't know you and I didn't know anyone. I knew of you. So I called my nephews and I had a meeting at my house with Stevie Salas and Rudy Salas. I told them I had left Capitol Records because I wanted to help them and others, and that I had 100 hours of studio time. And they were just forming a group they wanted to call Maya. And they agreed to go into the studio and cut some demos for me to see if I could sell them, you know, get them signed to a major label. But I told them not under the name of Maya. This is a story that for once and for all, everybody's got to know. because there's been a lot of bullshit about it. I didn't like the name Maya, even though there was a lot of new bands using ancient, our heritage names like Azteca. Even we use Yaqui, but Maya was having a marketing background. I knew that, like everybody else in the industry, is going to have some enemies. And I thought, Maya, all the enemies need to do is add a T-E at the end of Maya. And you have a very derogatory word against our Black brothers. And I told Stevie and Rudy, no, not under Maya. But why not? This is the name we want. And I'd explain to them, because they're going to, you'll get ridiculed by a large segment of a market that you may need. And what's the point of putting yourself in that kind of danger? I was thinking like a marketing man. I wasn't thinking like a producer at that time. So I convinced them, look, come back next week and give me some alternatives. And they came back with several. And one of them was Tierra. And I said, well, Tierra, it's hard for an Anglo to produce Tierra because you got to roll your R's and they can't do it. But if you pronounce it in English, Tiara, then it becomes a crown jewel, right? A tiara, it becomes a crown, a jeweled crown. So that's how the name Tierra was approved by me to go into the studio with my two nephews. And by that time, they had Kenny Roman. Kenny Roman.
As I recall, Steve Salas played bass on the first tracks. And then they brought in Conrad Lozano, later of Los Lobos.
Later. Yeah, that's right, Steve. Yeah. So, and then you came along. And by then I had talked to a lot of others, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to compliment you here, okay? Not to butter you up or anything. But there was a powder keg of talent in East L.A. at the time. And took me a year or more of trying to convince any label. You were the spark, because once I signed you with Lou Adler.
Right. But that happened before
like
this.
Rocket's red glare.
Right. But we got to remember that I was signed to Lou Adler before the Capitol thing. Before Capitol.
Yes.
Okay. So, so you had helped me get a deal with Lou Adler, which was a major thing, in 1971, which was a year before this whole Capitol independent studio thing. So yeah, we had that deal, but once you brought Tierra, Yaqui, me, and some other groups in to record, that's when Capitol selected me to be put out on Capitol. And then you were able to sell those groups to other labels, right? Is that what happened?
That's exactly right. Yeah. But what I was hoping to get clear is that after I signed you to Lou Adler, and it came out in the trades that Brown Bag Records had signed its first artist, then others began to call me, other labels began to call me and ask, do I still have some of those groups I had presented to them in the past? So we exploded after Mark Guerrero hit the trades of having made a deal with Lou Adler. Then it was Lou Adler, by the way, who told me to go see Russ Reagan, a friend of his that was heading
Uni
20th century.
Oh, that's right.
And then Tierra was signed. Tierra was signed maybe a week later. And soon after that, it was Yaqui. And then before you know it, the Carmen Morenos and the so many others.
Johnny Martinez also.
Yeah, Johnny Martinez. And then Capitol was glad to have you after you left Ode, and
well, I thought it was on the strength. I thought it was on the strength of the recording. Remember, I did Rock and Roll Queen. That was a pretty commercial sounding record, and that they wanted to put that out as a single.
Well, I've told you before, of all of the artists that I handled, I saw you as the most commercial on a nationwide basis. I thought if Mark gets a hit, Mark is going to be a star across the country, if not across the world, because yours was much. You sounded like the kind of music that was going on at that time. More so, obviously, than Tierra or Yaqui or the others that I have. But we were very gung-ho activists, all of us. And we were recording songs that were mostly social comment, right? We were doing the barrio suites and things of that kind.
And my second single was I'm Brown.
And I'm Brown, that's right. But you did that for Capitol, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm Brown was Capitol,
yeah,
at Capitol.
Yeah, so we were all doing this social conscious thing,
Yes, we all were, and I'm glad that we were, because we did our part. I was talking to Stevie Salas not long before he died, and we were talking about the possibilities of having a monument made to the Chicano soldiers that returned from Vietnam. And he said, well, Uncle, we all fought that war. Yes, we all appreciate the service of the Chicano soldiers in Vietnam, but we were all fighting that war in different segments of society. You and I and the people I was working with, we were fighting it within the entertainment industry. We had other people fighting it in sports, in medicine, in jobs. We were all fighting that fucking war. I, for one, and I can't speak for others, I was a very angry man. Sometimes I still get angry about the way, the denial, the marginalization of our people in those days. Your viewers, especially the younger ones, may not believe the difference in what society in America is today. We are much better off because you and me and people like us opened a lot of doors that they would not have had the opportunities to have gone to colleges they go to now, become the doctors and lawyers and the things that they become. But we broke down a lot of doors. We broke a lot of windows and saw that slogan, it's all you need. If you got the product, push it. And we had the product. And in pushing it, we kicked some ass in opening the doors in movies and music. We became very rich, not with money. We all became very rich because we accomplished so much for our people. And we met people that we would never have met had we not done what we did. And we went to places. Do you think, if we think about counter fiction, the notion that what would have happened if we not have done this? What would life have been? I wonder, would Mark Guerrero have had so many of his songs recorded by people like Herb Alpert? Would Mark Guerrero have ever had the kind of producer like Lou Adler, backed by Hal Blaine and some of the best singers, backgrounds? Would Mark Guerrero have ever signed with Capitol? Would Tierra have ever recorded for a major label and wound up at Carnegie Hall? Would Yaqui to this day be known as one of the best hard rock bands that ever come out of the East Side? Would Johnny Martinez have had a single that did so well because of a TV show that opened the show and closed the show? Would Carmen Moreno have gone to the Opie Festival had she not been a part of the Se Puede album? Would those Lobos have been approached so quickly after we did Se Puede to do their first studio commercial album? The best, what was it called? Only a band from East L.A. but
just another band from East
Would
LA.
any of us, right? Would any of us have gone forward had we not done what we did at that time? We'll never know. You have met the President of the United States. You have traveled all over the world. Would you have done that had you not worked for Brown Bag? Would I have done the things I did in television later and in movies had we not kicked some ass in the music business as kids? So we have to think, maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know.
Well,
but,
let me say something. I'm just glad that we did it. You know, it's on the record that we did it. We accomplished it. You started Brown Bag Productions, and you were trying to kind of create a Chicano Motown. And what you accomplished is I was on Capitol, Tierra was on 20th Century, Yaqui was on Playboy, Carmen was on Capitol, and Johnny Martinez. But you had an office there across the street from the Capitol Tower. It was a thing happening. It was really something that was getting going. And as you have said, one of the reasons it didn't get to where it had to get, or we wanted it to get, was all of our inexperience. You mentioned yourself, you were young. You may not have had the experience to pull it to the next level, business-wise.
You're right. You're right. And yet, when I was hired as a director of Motown Latino, I was offered everything that I needed. I mean, Motown brought me in to start a new label. Somehow they acquired the rights to Jose Feliciano's all-Spanish album called Escenas de Amor. And they didn't know what to do with it. And not only were they thinking, okay, so how are we going to distribute this? But maybe we should build a separate entity called Motown Latino. So they looked for someone and they hired me. And they told me up front, I was working for a guy named Jay Lasker, who worked directly for Berry Gordy. And Jay Lasker said to me that Berry Gordy had given him the mandate to make this thing happen in the Spanish market. And they meant the Spanish market. I wasn't doing Spanish or Mexican music, and my artists were not doing that either. So my attorney said to me, hang tough. In 3 months, 6 months, do what they want, because you're going to convince them that the way to really go is through Chicano music, bilingual, you know, the kind of stuff that we were doing.
Let me say something quickly. That was one of the problems we all faced, is that the record companies didn't know the difference between the Spanish market and the Chicano market. Somehow we weren't Americans, you know. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're Guerrero, then you belong in the Latin division. They didn't know the difference. And so they should have given you the right to do what you wanted, but they said Spanish market.
I agree with you. I mean, you remember the days when they wanted to change your name? Mm-hmm. They didn't know where to put us. They didn't know what category to put us into. Yeah. You know, even at the Tower Records, they used to say, well, what bin do we put the Guerreros? What bin do we put? I used to tell them, put them in the, you know, by alphabetical order in your American. They didn't get it. You know, I mean, I think like sometimes I look back at it, I think when I joined Capitol Records and they begin to like me a week later is because I didn't walk in like they expected me with a mariachi outfit or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. They expected me to be Mexican, you know, and then when they realized I'm American, you know, very proud to have a background, the Mexican background, they thought it was okay after all, you know. But I walked into the president of Capitol Records, not the one I had worked with, but several years later, who actually said to me, oh, there's Art Brambila again. What do you think this is? Take a Chicano out to lunch week? Now, as bad as that grammar is, I thought to myself, hey, there they go again. You know, because I'm bringing in Chicano artists to make a presentation to try to get them signed. Art Brambila is coming in with mariachis. You know, they still couldn't get it, man. So when I went to work for Motown, and they wanted Mexican music, because I had Jose Feliciano, I had a commitment to him, and I had to set up a distribution system. I called a Brambila music I had heard about in Guadalajara. Brambila just spelled the same as my name. And when the man got on the phone, he says, your name's Brambila? Are you connected with Colonel Brambila, the owner of this? I said, no. But where was your father from? I said, from Unión de Tula in Jalisco. Well, that's what we are. He said, we must be related. So they were very helpful. They were thrilled to hear from me. And you had Motown Latino? I said, but I'm looking for distributors. So they sent me to the distributors around Pico and Hoover, you know, Música Latina and a whole bunch of little small distributors. And I made deals with them for Motown because we had a all Spanish album by Jose Feliciano. So all of this was in the trades. Everybody knew who I was. Everybody knew that I was at Motown.
Mhm.
So you want me to go on?
Well, there's so many stories. I'd like to talk about.
I know there is. I know.
Oh, yeah, but listen, I want to say that speaking of the trades, we need to talk about how you sued Terry Knight, because you had Brown Bag Productions, and he came out with Brown Bag Records, and you sued Terry Knight, and it was very brilliant because not only were you suing him because of the name, but you knew that you can get a lot of publicity out of it, and you did. And as a result of the lawsuit, my name and Tierra's name and Yaqui's name was in Rolling Stone magazine, Cashbox, and Billboard. Art Brambila sues Brown Bag, Terry Knight. Art Brambila has 3 artists with major labels, and we got a ton of publicity, right?
Well, I had been using Brown Bag Productions for a couple of years, and I named it that because in the vernacular of those days, it's your bag, it's your thing. And brown was our skin color. Brown bag meant to me the Chicano thing. So I was very proud of that name, and everybody loved it. So all of a sudden, this rich kid from New York who had the Grand Funk Railroad and Mom's Apple Pie and was making millions of more dollars he never even needed, decides he's going to come up with the Brown Bag Records out of New York. And yes, I knew it would get me publicity, but I also was very offended that they would, just arbitrarily say, hey, let's take this name. So my attorneys, yes, they put together the summons and they tried to serve it. They couldn't serve him. He had offices here in L.A. at Liberty Records building across the street from Hollywood High School. And that's all they knew. They tried sending pretty girls to give them the summons. They tried everything. And after 2 or 3 months, and I had some really good attorneys, you may remember. I mean, Shankman, Thompson, and Moss were heavyweights. They were my age. They were kids. They were young and hungry, all Jewish and smart as hell.
Danny Moss.
And they, Danny Moss, yeah. And they told me one day, well, we can't serve this guy. He comes from New York. He spends a few hours in his office in that Liberty, then he flies back, and you just can't find him. So you're gonna have to serve him yourself, or I put in a call. Sometimes remember where I came from, and remember who I was surrounded by. So I called some of my old hood friends from Clover, one of whom was a Brown Beret. And he came into my office and I told him the situation. He said, well, don't worry, we're going to get him. I said, I don't want you to hurt him, man. I just want you to serve him these papers. Don't worry, we'll do it. We'll do it. I said, what do you mean you? I mean, we'll do it. He said, well, me and my friends. Okay. So then he calls me about a week or 2 later. He says, okay, Terry Knight's going to be in town on such and such a day. How do you know that? He said, we got our ways, How do you know he's going to be there at this time? He's going to be in his office at that time. I don't know where the hell they got this information. So I said, okay, come and pick up the papers. He brings in about 15 hood guys, tattoos all over the place, ugly guys. They even scared me, and I grew up in the day. That was funny. So, okay, give us the papers. I said, well, how much is this going to cost? And I take out my checkbook and nothing. Why should we charge you? This is our name. This is, so to give us the papers, I said, okay, well, I'll buy you guys a case of wine. San Antonio Special was okay, cool. San Antonio was a cheap wine you used to drink when you were kids. San Antonio Special. So they leave my office, 15 guys knocking out the door. About 2 hours later, they called me on the phone from a phone. We didn't have cell phone. Okay, Turi, they used to call me Turi. Yeah, we served them, and I could hear the laughter behind them. How did you do it? Well, we'll go to your office right now. So a few minutes later, they're in my office, and they're laughing and patting each other in the back. And I said, what happened? Well, we went into Liberty Records, and everybody got out of our way. It scared the hell out of everybody. Security moved away from them. The girls were screaming, and where's Terry Knight's office? Over there, glass windows. And so they went into Terry Knight's office. They opened the door, and they can't find him at first. He was hiding under the desk. And they said to me, and we found him trembling under the desk, and we said, "Get out of there." And we handed him and they served him the papers. I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Did you break any, you hit any, did you hurt anybody?" No, we didn't do anything like that. So I was happy they served them, but I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, I'm full of messages. I used to have a message service in those days. We didn't have a recorder. And the first one I called is my attorney. And he's laughing. And he said, "Don't worry about it. It's all over town." He said, "We know what happened. They didn't hurt anybody." I said, "But am I in trouble or any?" No, they didn't do anything. They walked in. They had the right to walk in. Sure, they should have gone through security, but the security left as soon as they saw it. And so they walked in and they served the guy. I said, "But they didn't hurt anybody. They didn't break anything." No, nada. Don't worry about it. It didn't even come out in newspapers. It didn't even come out in the trades that I remember. But as a result of the lawsuit, we didn't get the money we were asking for, and we didn't expect it. But we got a lot of publicity, even Rolling Stone, and that helped. So we were a blazing star there for a while, all of us, because we're making things happen. We are knocking down doors. We are breaking the damn windows and saying, "We are somebody too. You're not going to keep us away from the music business just because you don't understand us. We're going to make you understand us." And we did it. So I'm very proud of those days.
Me too.
And as I say, the spark was Mark Guerrero. Because once you got signed and it came out in the trades, that's when everybody started calling, "Oh, you still have that guy you still have that group that you presented to us last year?" I'm not kidding you, man. Hollywood is a whore.
Can I quote you on that? Hollywood is a whore. Wow. Yeah. Cool, man. Thank you. So you and I, despite all the stuff we did together, we had some business disagreements, and we split up, and I wound up going to A&M Records and doing an album over there. And you went on to do many things, including the Se Puede album. Let's talk about that. It's very historic, very important.
Well, the Se Puede album is, to me, my shining light. But the Se Puede album was not planned. It happened as a favor to Cesar Chavez. I was sitting one Saturday afternoon watching TV, and I was watching American Bandstand. And I was watching soon after Soul Train. And all the time I'm thinking, how come we don't have a show like that? How come we have a black show and a white show, a dance show, and we don't have anything? So I picked up my trusty, yellow pad, and I started formatting the idea for a television show, a dance show with Chicanos. And there's a long story because I worked a long, hard year to try to get finance. I went to everybody for financing. I went to Danny Villanueva. Everybody was interested, but nobody would come up with the money. No Chicano I knew came up with the money. The Jews were always the ones to back me. I'm not kidding you. I love the Jews anyway, but not only because they financed me, but because they all gave me good advice. And so one day I'm frustrated. I had gone to everybody. I couldn't get the money to do a pilot show. And something told me, just go to Capitol Records. And because, I knew the president at Capitol Records. So I walk into the lobby and I say, "I want to see Don Zimmerman." And "Who are you?" The receptionist said, "My name's Art Brambila." I mean, I was bold, and I was assertive. And so there's a guy named Mark Brambila here. I said, "Oh, send him up." So I went up to see Don Zimmerman. I said, "Don, I'm doing a television show." And I didn't prepare myself for the meeting. I was just pissed off. And I need to do a single to open up the show and to close the show. I need so many to do. And well, what's the show about? I said, well, the Chicano bandstand, a Chicano soul. Think Chicano bandstands, think Chicano. And so, who's your artist that you want to record? I hadn't thought about that. I could have said Mark Guerrero. I could have said Tierra. I could have said whatever. The first thing that jumped in the mind was Johnny Martinez. And I knew of Johnny Martinez, but I didn't know Johnny Martinez. And I said, he's the king of salsa in L.A. Because he asked me who's Johnny Martinez. I didn't know Johnny Martinez, but I only knew of him. So anyway, now I go, so he says, okay, how much do you need for the single? I told him, and which was a lot of money in those days for a single. And he picks up the phone of business department. He says, right up the standard contract for Art Brambila. Are you still brown by yeah, and so he says for such an amount of money. And okay, so I'm thrilled. He approved the deal right on the spot, and now I got a problem because I don't know Johnny Martinez, and I just sold Johnny Martinez. So it's funny because this is true. Sometimes I feel that God blessed me because he saw such hard work and the frustration and discrimination and all that. And so now I'm driving home all happy because I know I have the budget to do a single with Johnny Martinez. And my phone is ringing. And I hurry up, open the door, trip over the sofa, fall on my back, answer the phone, and it's Danny Villanueva. Art, he says, guess what? I said, what? He had refused to give me to invest. And he says, a couple of Jewish guys just walked out of my office. They came here to ask if I would help promote Gladys Knight and the Pips that they have the rights to, and they wanted to advertise it on KMEX. Remember, Danny Villanueva was the head of the But I told them I'm a Spanish station. We're all Spanish, strictly Spanish, and we don't want to start advertising product in English. But I told them about you and your idea for doing the bilingual TV show. And they were really interested. They want you to call them, and they got a lot of money. I called them. They were in Sacramento, I think. Old man named Al Levitt, who's still near and dear to my heart, says, okay, we'll be down there on Thursday, and we'll have lunch and we'll talk about it. And sure enough, he and a guy named Mike Lee and I had lunch, and I told them what I was doing. They said, well, we'll put up the money for it. And they did. So now I have to call Johnny Martinez. And I said, Johnny, I know you don't know me. Oh, I know you are, Art. I said, well, and so I'd like you to have lunch with me. We went to Howard Johnson. And I'm sitting with Johnny Martinez for the first time, and I'm saying, and I took him intentionally. I took him to Howard Johnson's on Hollywood and Vine because you could see the tower. I said, Donnie, how would you feel if I did a deal for you at, right there at the tower? He said, what kind of a deal? I said, maybe, I don't know, an album or something, maybe a single. I already had the deal, but he didn't know it. Because he wanted to play hard, hard-nosed and say, well, if you got the deal, I want a lot of money up front or whatever. Anyway, well, he said, hey, man, if you could get me a deal at Capitol Records, of course I would. So we made a standard deal, some standard contract. Yeah, so that's how I got Johnny to go into the little studio in the same place where my office was. Remember the little studio? Yeah. Very good studio. And we did his whole album there. So Johnny Martinez went on Capitol Records on the strength of the Mean Salsa Machine, the TV show that ran for 23 weeks. And in many of those 23 weeks, Mark, we beat Bandstand and Soul Train in the readings on Saturdays, Yeah. But to get it on the air is where the Se Puede album comes in. Shall I go on?
Yes.
I mean, there's so much to talk about.
So you had the theme song, but you didn't have the show, and you were trying to raise money for the pilot, and you went to Cesar Chavez.
Yeah. Yes, I had to go to because I had already been going to Coca-Cola for a year, and they were interested in the show's concept. And they told me, yeah, we'll sponsor the show. And then they'd say, well, you got to give us more. All this bullshit. It went on for a year. And I was fed up. And so I called Cesar Chavez at his office. And he picked up the phone. I mean, I didn't know Cesar Chavez. Obviously, I knew of him. He was already world famous. He was very nice. And he said, yes, Art, he says, if you could meet me at Bakersfield tomorrow or the next day, whatever, because they were having their annual meeting. So I drive up there to Fresno. But he's too busy in his meetings and all that. So he said, tomorrow I'm going back to my campgrounds, it's called La Paz. And if you could meet me. So next, I went into a motel, and the next day I go to La Paz. So I walk in this place with 12-foot chain link fences and guard dogs and guys and machine guns or whatever they were. They opened the gate for me, and I go and see Cesar Chavez. And in his office, he told his secretary to hold his calls. And so I told him, I got this pilot show. I had already shot the pilot show with Freddie Fender and Tito Puente, which is another story.
That's another story.
But so he called in his staff, and on an orange crate, he cleared an orange crate, and they brought in a VCR player, and they put in my cassette tape of the pilot show. And Dolores Huerta was there, all of the big shots. And they loved the concept of the show. And before I left the office, he patted me on the back. And, well, first of all, they gave me that, faster. The clap, the applaud that they approve of you. And I was a kid when you think about it. Yeah. And so let me tell you his last words.
Yeah.
You'll be hearing from somebody in a few days. In a few days, I got a call from Coca-Cola. Mr. Brambila, we have your contracts ready. To this day, and I never asked him, I don't know what kind of string Cesar Chavez pulled, but he got Coca-Cola to make a commitment on the sponsorship, and that's how the show got in there.
Now, was this a sponsorship for the pilot to be made or for the show itself? The pilot was already made?
The pilot was made already.
Where did you get the money for the pilot?
From Al Levitt and Matt Bagley, those Jewish guys.
Now you got to tell the story of Tito Puente. It's incredible. It's for the pilot.
Well, the night before we did the pilot, and by the way, here's another story. I rented PJ's to do the pilot show, and PJ's was owned by someone that I didn't know who he was, and I once pinned him against the wall because he pissed me off. And you know who that was?
Gangster, wasn't it?
Eddie Nash. Remember Eddie Nash from the Wonderland Murders? The guy who was in the porno and selling. He owned like 12 nightclubs in Hollywood, including the Seventh Veil, where he had his office on the second floor. I used to go pay him the money. He used to bring out wads of money with a big old rubber band. And he didn't need my money, but that's the way he was. Very flashy guy. He was from Arabian or something. I don't know where he was from. And I was renting PJs to do all the shoots from that guy who a few years later was convicted of murdering 4 or 5 people up in Laurel Canyon. And he was a good friend of that porno actor. What was his name? The John
Holmes.
And I used to see porno actresses all around him. I mean, I never took no comfort there because, I didn't need that. I used to go to pasta house and I don't want to get paid, you know what I mean? So, I mean, there was plenty to do in East L.A. I didn't need to go and fool around with his ilk. So I had nothing to do with him except that I rented his place. And one time I got a call when they were putting up when you're doing this Mean Salsa Machine, they were going to put up the sets like 4 o'clock in the morning. And the doors aren't open. I got really pissed at that. So I called him, Eddie Nash. What the hell's wrong with you? Your crew wasn't there to open the doors. We got to put up the. And then the next time when I went to pay him the rent, I told him, you do that again. And I scolded Eddie Nash, man. He could have had me killed right there. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I was dealing with one of the biggest gangsters out of LA. So, yeah.
And of course, PJ's, Trini Lopez famously made his hit records there. His first album, Live at PJ's.
Yeah. Trini Lopez. Yeah.
So you needed somebody for the pilot. And you went to see Tito Puente, who you'd never met. He was performing at the Coconut Grove.
Well, first of all, I met Freddie Fender through through Al Levitt, had an attorney named Len Korotkin, and Len Korotkin was also Freddie Fender's attorney. So Al Levitt, when we signed the contracts for a partnership under Pan American Entertainment Group, only to do the Mean Salsa Machine, said to me, "I can get you Freddie Fender on your new show." Well, because he was a name, I said yes, not because I thought he fit the format of what I had in mind, and it was only a pilot anyway. That's how. Oh, and Tierra and the Salad Brothers were in the pilot show because they were my nephews, and so the night before we shoot the pilot, I read that he was the Tito Puente was closing at the Ambassador Hotel where they shot Kennedy. And I told my wife, "I'm going to go, I'll be back." "Where are you going?" "I'm going to go to the Ambassador." And I lived in San Gabriel. So I drove to the Ambassador Hotel. Mark, I don't know what I had, but I talked my way into getting backstage as they were breaking down. The concert was over. And I went to talk to Tito Puente. And I told him, I introduced myself, and I told him that we're shooting a pilot on the Mean Salsa Machine. He showed some interest, but okay, so. And I told him I want him to be in that pilot show. He said, "But we're leaving tomorrow. We got a flight in the morning." And he said, "I'm leaving." I said, "No, what? I want all of you." He said, "My band?" I said, "Yes." And so I don't know what I had, but I convinced him to do it. He turns around and he tells the guys, "Hey, come here, that guy wants to do it." They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I was doing, but I must have said the right thing, because the next morning they were all at PJ's unloading their rented truck. They stayed another night at the hotel at their expense to do the pilot show. So they were in the Tito Puente, Freddie Fender, and the Salad Brothers were on the pilot show. That's the show I showed to Cesar Chavez, who then talked to Coca-Cola, who sponsored the next 23 weeks on the air. Now, Si Se Puede.
Oh yeah, but before we get off of that, during your run of the Mean Salsa Machine, you had on Donna Summer and some big name people.
Oh yeah, we had the biggest people at that time, and many of them were coming out of Motown. Remember, now Motown, I have the history with them after that, because of my dealings with Motown. They already knew who I was. Yes, with Donna Summers, Rick Springfield, Al Green, so many of those, the four lads, or I don't know, the guy that did Feelings, with Morris, the thing was one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Donna Summer, and we had a lot of big stars in that show. Yeah.
And it ran for how long?
23 weeks. Actually, we did 20 episodes, and they were 1 hour shows. They were like bandstand and stuff, and it was very well done for its time. But the station, Channel 9, KHJ, had sold upfront advertising. So they asked me if they could repeat 2 of the shows. I said, yeah. So we did 20 episodes, but it ran for 22, 23 weeks.
Quite an accomplishment. So that led to the Si Se Puede thing for Cesar.
Well, I wanted to do something for Cesar Chavez. And I thought, well, I'll put up a concert, because we had done that. Remember the concert that you were in?
The Feria. We got to talk about that too. It's really
that's another story.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
And I was talking to my girlfriend, and I was saying I was divorced by then. I want to do a concert to show my appreciation to Cesar Chavez. And she looked at me and said, "Well, why don't you do what you do best?" And I thought, what? And she said, "Why don't you do an album about his songs and his plight and the struggles of the United Farmer?" I said, that is a hell of an idea. And so I started thinking about that album in my mind. And then I was talking to someone else who said, if you think De Colores sounds good with an adult singing it, you ought to hear what a kindergartner sounds like singing that song. de colores. And I began to imagine that in my head. And so, yeah, I put together the Si Se Puede album, and I went to Los Lobos because they were the best for that kind of music. And I don't think they trusted me. You know, as you were saying, you know, as friendly as we are with each other, and we're sure we have disagreements. Look at the Salad Brothers' disagreement. And you and I, to me, it was not that big a deal. It was just something we disagreed on, you know. I mean, you never became my enemy, and neither were Los Lobos. And they said to me, but Art, how do we know that what y'all, because I told them I want to do this album and I want you guys to, you know, to be the main people in it. Well, how do we know that you're not giving us a bunch of bull? Can you get us a letter from Cesar Chavez, you know, acknowledging that you have the right to do this? I said, I'll do better. I'll introduce you to Cesar Chavez. And so I called Cesar Chavez and I told him what I was doing. And he was, oh, you don't need to do that. I said, yes, I do. I want to do an album about your struggles. And I want you, the next time you're in town, I want you to meet the people that are going to do it. By then I had talked to my nephews and I had talked to other people. So in my office, an entourage with Cesar Chavez and his people came into my office, media people, place was jam-packed. And we had big offices at the Motown building up in the penthouse, the Mean Salsa Machine offices. And so I had a mock-up of the front cover as I expected it to be, so that when Cesar Chavez sees it, he'll see Si Se Puede, you know. And so then he sat near me. I was sitting here. All of the artists were in front of me, including the parents of some of the kids from the Santa Teresita church that I went over and rehearsed with to get them to sing De Colores. All of them were there, and Cesar Chavez was sitting there and thanked them all for being a part of this upcoming project. And we took pictures like that. And yeah, then the Lobo said, well, gee, we got to meet Cesar Chavez, and he said, thank you to us for, you know, we haven't done anything yet. And then they worked very hard. They arranged everything.
So I'd like to add something here. So Los Lobos had not been with a major label yet. That didn't come till 1983. This was 1976. I think they may have made their first album on a small label, but they were very popular and very well known and respected. So you had them. You had Jerry Gonzalez, you had Carmen Moreno, you had Stephen Rudy Salas. All those people participated on the album.
Well, I brought a guy named Tigre Rodriguez out of Phoenix. We flew him in for the session because what happened, remember Phil Sonicson?
Of course.
An ethnomusicologist out of UCLA?
Of course.
Well, the LA Times had interviewed him, and Phil mentioned my name as being one of the guys who have written some songs about the movement. And then the LA Times called me and wanted to know if they could use one of my songs on a 60 Minutes show, which wasn't called that at that time. It was just called CBS News. Well, Phil Sonicson had accumulated hundreds of songs from various sources, at least 100 that I heard that were written by farm workers and people that believed, that were, you know, supportive of the United Farm Workers. I listened to all of them as I was sitting on the floor of my house, and much of the time Phil was there. So I selected the songs I wanted on the Si Se Puede album. And so those are the songs. The only thing I did on the album, I mean, I did the whole album, but I didn't, again, like when working with you, if you believe in an artist, you believe in him because he's better than you are at whatever they do. You know what I mean? So I didn't tell those Lobos how to sing it. I didn't tell them how to. They did it. Jerry Gonzalez interpreted my song with an emotion that I never imagined that anybody. I would never do it like that.
Mañana is now.
Yeah, mañana is now. I mean, I remember when we were recording her, she had tears running down her eyes in that emotion. The help that I got from Carmen Moreno and teaching those little kids the harmonies too. I mean, I could never do that. I'm not a musician, right? Mm-hmm. So I did the Si Se Puede album as an executive producer. But utilizing the talents that were there, it's all you need. You know, that slogan to me when I was a little kid is what I live by. Because if you got the product, that's all I need. I can handle the rest of it, but the product has to be there. So I don't mess with the product. I don't try to change it, Mark.
You got to use A&M Studios through Herb Alpert to make the album.
Yeah, I called Herb Alpert, and I told him what we were doing. He was very open-minded to that because he was a very liberal guy. I told him I was doing an album. I wanted to do an album with Los Lobos. Who's Los Lobos? You know, well, for Cesar Chavez, Cesar Chavez, you know, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, he gave me all of the studio time I needed, all of the tape and the engineer. Wow. So I got all of those people who got into the studio, and it took us, I don't know, a couple of weeks to cut the whole album. But those Lobos worked their ass off. They were obviously very talented, and they used to rehearse at where I lived. But I never said, well, change this or change that, or don't do it. You know, that wasn't my bag. That wasn't my who I was. I was a producer like Ken Nelson, who I was influenced by. Hey, you recording Merle Haggard? You're not going to tell Merle Haggard how to sing a song, you know. And you know, like with you, Mark, I tell you right now, I never used your father's name in a presentation of Mark Guerrero. Mark Guerrero was all I needed. And you didn't, with all due respect, you wouldn't want to be.
I never mentioned it.
You use that way, you know what I mean?
But like I said, those people wouldn't know who he was anyway. He was mostly known in the Chicano community and in Mexico. But I never brought it up. I never wanted to bring it up.
But you got the talent yourself, you know. And Los Lobos and the Salazars and I did have a few riffs here and there because they were my nephews, and I guess I felt a little bit more at ease and telling them how I wanted it, especially with Stevie. Stevie was a pain in the ass in the studios, you know? No, man, he was a perfectionist. I mean, it reminds me of when I did Carmen Moreno's first demo. Have I told you lately that I love you? I wrote it in Spanish and English there. Two takes with just her guitar, and I took it to Capitol Records, and they signed you like that. Stevie Salas would never allow that. He'd want 100. He never said it. He always thought he could do it better, and he could often do it better. But he's the only one I really had fights with, Stevie Salas, because he was so good that no matter how he sang it and how many times, he could still make it sound good. So I mean, at what point do you start, Stevie? That's enough. We don't need another take, you know. But Rudy, on the other hand, was a piece of cake. Rudy was a smart businessman. Rudy was intelligent. He had drive. Rudy was totally responsible for in my opinion, for the hit song Together. He got his own bank financing. He got scheduled his own studio. He did everything. And then he and his wife, Martha, promoted the hell out of that thing and would take those albums to the local. He made it happen.
And Rudy had the wherewithal to keep Tierra together for 30 years through constant personnel changes.
He branded Tierra. You know, he made Tierra. I was one of them that started Tierra. I never took credit for it because that's not me. You know, as I say, you guys are the product. You guys are where the lights should shine. We, the Eddie Davises, Art Brambila, the Maxi Biases. Hey, stand back. You got your product there.
Right.
And
you know, let me say something about Steve Salas. Now, Steve Salas, great talent, great charisma. Everybody loves him, but he was kind of a free spirit, and he wasn't the most responsible guy in the world. You know, Rudy was the one keeping.
That's how we all loved it because he didn't seem to care about the rest of. But Rudy was a businessman as a young kid. I mean, I tell you, he used to look at me playing guitar, and there was something going on in his head, you know, as a little boy. You know, it was the trip. You know.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Feria de la Raza. Let's turn the clock back to 1972, the historic concert at Cal State L.A. out in the football field. And it was billed as the first Chicano Rock Concert. And it was in the sense that all the Chicano shows before that were dances and shows and, you know, a theater show, East L.A. College. But a concert a la Woodstock, people sitting on the grass, smoking grass, you know, it was like a Chicano little Woodstock. And the lineup was me. I was a solo artist with Capitol, and I was billed as Mark Guerrero with the Mud Brothers. We had Tierra, who was with 20th Century Records already. We had Elijah, great horn band from Montebello. And they were recording for United Artists Records. And Carmen Moreno, recording for Capitol. Was it Epic or Capitol at that time? I don't know. Maybe it was Epic at the time.
I think it was Epic at that
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
And El Chicano, who was riding high with their big hit. So we had El Chicano, Tierra, me, Carmen Moreno, and Elijah outside at night. And
At Cal State L.A.
and it was a tremendous thing. And it's considered very historic. I was asked to write a whole piece on it for a book called, what's it called? Turn Up the Radio, Pop Rock and Roll, 1958 to 74, something like that, by Harvey Kubernick. And I'm in that book in many sections on various things, but he asked me to write a piece on that concert and why it was important. And I did, so it's in that book. And yeah, so you put it together, talk about how that happened.
Well, I did, and for many years, well, the LA Times called it, said that there were 10,000 people there. A lot of people dispute that and say it was at 12 to 15,000. But last year, you wrote on your Facebook some kind of a tribute to that concert from 50 years ago.
And I showed the flyer.
And you showed the flyer, right? And, my head started spinning because a lot of people responded to you, to your post, that they had really remembered it. And some said they hadn't even been born yet. Many said, why don't you do it again? And gee, I wish I had been there. And yes, I heard a lot about it. All of these comments that were responding to what you did, had me going crazy. And so a lot of people started saying, why don't you do it again? 50th anniversary. I wasn't going to mention this except that tomorrow I have a meeting that is very important. So I'm going to tell you what's been going on. I'll tell you quickly. All of last year, I surrounded myself with some of the movers and shakers of East L.A. Everybody from the moratoriums to the David Sandovals and Danny Hernandez's of the Hollenbeck Youth Center, Tomas Benitez, some of the best people that have proven themselves to be doers are a part of this. I met with Jerry Velasco, who is now my partner. We used to head the Nosotros organization with anyway, we met with East LA College and we signed a deal to bring in Carlos Santana at East LA to make the Feria La Raza the 50th anniversary. But it didn't happen this year because Carlos Santana hasn't been too well, and also because his schedule is packed all this year. But because of who I've been, I didn't want to give it. I had told everybody, look, it's not going to happen. We didn't get Carlos Santana. The management didn't want to do it. But something has been gnawing at my brain and in my heart. When did you start giving up? I've been so audacious for my entire life, but I don't want to get away from not doing it with Carlos Santana. And the people say, why does it have to be Carlos Santana? And I don't know. Something tells me I want to see Carlos Santana, and he's never done East LA. Carlos Santana has never done a concert in East LA. So I've talked to his management. Eddie Olmos has called Carlos Santana. Dolores Huerta has talked to him. We try, and he wants to do it. Carlos Santana wants to do East LA College. We got the contracts with East LA College. And we can pack that place. So about a month ago, I called the president of East LA College again. I said, look, I'm sorry it didn't happen too. I really would like to, well, let's do it. Let's try it again. So tomorrow I'm meeting with them. Now I can say this. This was all secret for a year. We're going to try it again. And any help that we could get from anybody to get Carlos Santana at East LA College, I would appreciate it, because I want to go out in my career with a bang. I don't want to, people have said, well, you can bring in the Lonely Boys, these are big acts. But I don't want to. Something tells me Carlos Santana is my contemporary. I want Carlos Santana at East LA College. And if I don't get him,
he's the only one that can fill the stadium.
I believe that too. I can believe that too. I mean, just think, to end my career bringing Carlos Santana into the East L.A. College Stadium.
Very perfect.
I mean, I would go away and write my memoirs. I wouldn't need to do anything. I don't need to do it now, but I want to still, you know? I mean, that's just who I am. And
so this would be technically the 50th anniversary, 51st
well, actually,
anniversary
the 51st year, yeah, because
of our original concert.
You and I have talked. You went to a couple of our meetings.
Yeah.
You got to be in that concert. You know, El Chicano has to be in that concert. Tierra Legacy, we'll see what happens after August because they're going into court.
Complicated.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. It's another thing that breaks my heart about what they're having to go through. You know, and we bring in you with your group and doing some of your dad's songs and your own on Brown, and you know, I'd like to see that happen. And I don't know if I'll be twisting in my grave someday if it doesn't happen. You know what I mean?
Spinning.
I don't want to see that.
Yeah, well, that would be great. That would be
But
fantastic.
I want to talk to you about something before it slips my mind. Many people have asked me what I regret in my career, and I'm going to tell you. I see 3 male singers in our contemporary days and 3 female singers that I believe were destined to be national, international stars. I want to name them. One of them I saw yesterday in concert. I went to see him in concert. The 3 people that I wish I had worked with, okay, in no particular order. I see Little Ray Jimenez, Steve Salas, and Little Willie G as the best entertainers that I know came out of the East Side. Singers, performers, charisma, everything that it's all you need. I never worked with Little Ray, and I never worked with Little Willie G. Obviously, I worked a lot with Steve Salas, practically to his dying day. Then I see Jerry Gonzalez, no particular order. Isela Sotelo in her prime, and Ursi as the best female artist that I would have liked to. I worked with Jerry, never worked with, and I worked with Isela. I signed Isela to Motown Records, you know. Yeah, Isela Sotelo was on Motown. I brought her in. But I just needed to say that because everybody has some regrets. I regret I never worked with Little Willie G. I regret I never worked with Mike. I mean, I worked with Mikey Jimenez, but with Little Ray Jimenez. I regret I never worked with Ursi. I did work with Isela and I did work with Cherry. And yet, somehow there, Carmen Cristina Moreno should be there as one of the, she wasn't technically from East L.A., she's from Fresno. You know it better than I do. But she too was an incredible singer, international star. That doesn't take away anything from the Mark Guerreros, because I think that you were one of the most commercial, as I said before. I've loved you from the day I met you. I think you're a great star. So I just needed to say that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Let's say something about the Grammy thing before we finish. We just had the panel discussion and concert at the Grammy Museum, April 13th this year, 2022. You were on the panel, Jerry Gonzalez, me, and Little Willie G. And we had a panel discussion, which was great because we got to talk about the Chicano movement, but also some of the successes and frustrations we had with the music business. And the concert went beautifully. Tell me what that experience was like for you.
I wasn't happy with myself. I tried to answer the questions. You know, I have a hearing problem, as you know, and the questions, I didn't all hear them correctly. Some of the, like when my nephew, Bobby Brambila, stood up, I wanted to mention that he was the founder of the Enchantments. I wanted to answer his question and somebody else did instead, and that's okay. He wasn't asking it directly of me, you know. I thought it was an honor, obviously, to be asked, and I credit you for that. I felt almost humbled to be there at the Grammy Museum. But my own performance, and you know, but I'm not a performer. You know what I mean? So maybe it's okay.
Well, I mean, I disagree in the sense that I thought you were perfect in the sense that we needed somebody to represent the business side, talk about the frustrations that you had trying to explain what a Chicano was, and that they wanted to change my name, to have a forum, to have Chicanos take over the Grammy Museum and tell their story was incredible to me, historic, and one of the greatest experiences of my life because of that.
All right. Well, again, would you have been there? Would I have been there? Would Little Willie G have been there if it wasn't for the breaking down the doors and the
We all did.
That we'll never know. We'll never know.
Well, we all did it, and I hope the younger generation of musicians realize, you know, what we went through and what we did way
Mark
back then.
Guerrero, we did well. We did well.
Mhm.
And as I said, we may not have made a lot of money, but we got very rich.
But we made great records. Let's go over
Yes.
this. I mean, I'm proud to this day of I'm Brown. It's been, you know, in the Grammy Museum and exhibits.
That's right.
Recognized, and it's one of my favorite things I've ever done, if not the most favorite. And then, you know, Tierra's first album, in my opinion, is the best album Tierra ever made. It's a great
classic.
album. Barrio Suite, one of the greatest songs they ever did. Yaqui, great album, great band. Time for a Change. You know, we made some great records. The evidence is there.
We really did.
We didn't get promotion, but the evidence is there.
I am very proud of my career, and I'm very proud of the people I worked with. We did well. You know, nobody can deny that.
Yeah, there you go.
But I should have listened to my attorney when he said to me, "Give it 3 or 6 months at Motown, because they're going to see that you're right, that you are a Chicano manager producer, not a Mexican." You know, even they didn't get it at that time. But if I had stayed there, I would have had all of the distribution, all of the publicity and promotion department, everything we wanted, the studios, producers. I could have gotten Stevie Wonder, maybe write a song for somebody. You know, I could have done those things. But I got a call from Universal Pictures. The president wanted to meet with me, offered me a ton of money and all this glamour. And I moved over to Universal. I was at Universal for like 8 years, working in all those movies, setting up to this. Now, every studio has a multicultural marketing department. At that time, it was only me. They told me, set up a department that promotes our movies to the Latino, they called it Hispanic, to the Latino Chicano markets, and to the Asian and Black market. I set it up. You know, started with nothing. Innovated a lot of stuff that to this day is being used. It's amazing.
Well, the executives back in our day, back in the early 70s, you know, and probably even today, they don't really understand what a Chicano is. They don't understand that we're Americans, just like anybody else, born and raised here, we're Americans. But it's like, I think they told you at Capitol when I was writing some country rock, they're saying, well, what is this Mexican or Chicano doing country rock for? Why not? You know? And as I said at the Grammy Museum, I said, hey, I'm as American as apple pie. I'm as American as a taco. You know? They don't get it.
It's amazing.
And I don't think they still get it.
But it was worse in those days than it is today. You know, I mean, again, and I don't want to repeat myself, but damn it, sometimes I get pissed off at the young people today who think that they did it themselves. They don't realize that dead bodies out there, the doors that we broke down, the marching, the chanting, you know how much time I spent in record lobbies waiting for someone to come and look in I used to carry a brown bag with all the tapes. And I remember when I booked, there was a guy named Doug Weston who used to own the Troubadour. And I knew him well at Capitol Records because I used to help put up not physically, but I used to make arrangements to put a billboard. He had a group called Hedge and Donna. And he was in the offices one time and I was talking to him. And I whispered in his ear that, let this group called Yaqui, and when I put in his place, I had booked Tierra at what's the one on Sunset?
Whiskey.
The whiskey. and Yaqui on the same weekend at the Troubadour. The guy knew who I was. So now I go to see him to listen to my music. They tell me he's busy right now, but to wait here. I was waiting outside the door. Hours. He wouldn't come out. Pretty soon this club starts closing and the janitors are cleaning up, and I'm asking, well, where's Doug Weston? Oh, he's in his office. He'll just wait another hour. He never came. He left out the back door. It was like 2:00 in the morning when I walked out of there with my brown bag, and I went home with tears in my eyes. And my wife says, what happened? Never saw him. That son of a bitch. I had seen him earlier in the day at Capitol Records, and he told me to be at his office. He wants to hear my music. People don't know what we went through, the struggles and the frustrations and the anger. And remember, I was a barrio kid. It wouldn't cross my mind but to kick his ass. You know what I mean? But
Well, you know, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And now these younger kids think they did it themselves. Bullshit.
Well, I was on 4 major labels in 5 years. 69 Cap Records, which was a universal, what would you call it, MCA label with my group in 1984.
You were an MCA?
Yeah, it was Cap MCA.
Oh, Cap, that's right.
And then in 71, solo artist with Lou Adler, Ode Records, distributed by A&M, produced by Lou Adler. 72 Capitol Records, 2 singles, and then 73, 74 A&M Records. But I never got any promotion. Never got any promotion. You know, we didn't get.
You never were promoted?
We never got any promotion of any kind as far as magazines, billboards,
Mark,
tour, nothing.
Mark, it was your last name. Believe me.
That's what I think.
Look at Little Willie G changed his name, you know.
Freddie Fender, Vicky Carr, Richie Valens.
Sometimes I wonder if my name had not been Brambila, if I had been a Gutierrez or Enriquez, would they have hired me at Capitol? But, you know, my immediate boss was Italian, a guy named Marchese. The president of marketing was Catina, Rocco Catina. They heard Brambilla and they heard Italian. Sometimes I wonder if they may not even have hired me at Capitol.
My name was Garcia.
They didn't have an Italian name.
Yeah.
If I had gotten in there as a Garcia, would they really have hired me? You know, I mean, that's the way it was, you know, and I'm glad we're emphasizing this because a lot of people today don't know that, or they don't want to believe it. But it was not an easy place to be in the 60s and 70s in America for Chicanos, you know.
Yep.
But we won.
That's right. We made our mark and the evidence is there. So thank you, Art, for doing the show. Appreciate it.
Hey, you know, I humbly feel honored. I would do anything for you. You know that. And
well, hopefully we'll do this.
Guys like you is all I need. You know.
Hopefully we get that show going next year, man.
Thank you. Gee, a little prayer from all of your viewers, I hope, because we got to have Carlos Santana. If Carlos Santana doesn't do East L.A. after all the years of support they've gotten for Chicanos in this side of the world, it would be a forever shame. Yes. We got to get Carlos Santana at East L.A. College.
That's right. Okay, man. Thanks, Art. Talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you very much.